Good morning. It is 10:04 a.m. and I am going to call to order the Board of Directors meeting, regular meeting for the Denton County Transportation Authority. All voting members are present. So the first item of business will be to have the invocation. I'm going to ask Alfred Smith.
Oh, there's my non-embarrassment mode not working.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Lord, we come before you on this beautiful day, after a week of rain that we so desperately needed, and thank you for that answered prayer. Pray for wisdom and discernment for the men and women around this table, for the staff as they present, for the contractors and that are part of a critical team to help move people throughout Denton County. Help us to be wise in our decisions, and just pray that you would help us to grow the impact of DCTA as we try to serve those that we also do. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Now, please, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Now, Texas flag. Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the Texas. Introductions is the next item of business. Christina, do we have any introductions? Staff, see any instructions?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Next item we'll move on to is our public comment section. And this agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the DCTA board on any agenda items or other matters related to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks will be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistlings, yells, clappings, and similar conversations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not able to participate in person must email his or her comments to Ms. Keisha Morrison Perkins at DCTA.net no later than 3 p.m. on Wednesday, August 24th, to ensure that the comments will be distributed to the board prior to the meeting. At this time, I have 2 cards. The first speaker we will call is Ms. Eva Greco, Denton County. Ms. Greco, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to talk fast. We usually do from Jersey. Your regular agenda item 3, more money is going to VIA again, but nothing is going again to fix routes. Second, spoken before about micromanaging. It's still micromanaging. And you're losing good employees. Like Pamela Burns, who just resigned. Okay. Last item. Public comments. Nowhere on the agenda does it say that we can no longer call in. But you've made an announcement last month that we can't call in. You see your public comment section right there on the screen. You can speak for 3 minutes. It does not say you cannot call in. 2 meetings ago, I made a factual statement. Okay. A board member took it total out of context. Got very overdramatic. I never degraded anybody. I've not gotten a public apology from that board member. The following month, oh, no public, you can't call in anymore to speak at a public meeting. Okay. The word seems like retaliation, and that's how it is taken by the public. Okay. Doesn't matter how you mean it, that's how the public is seeing it. That it is retaliation for what I said, which was grossly misstated. You now have COVID on the rise. We have, as of a few days ago, 29 cases of monkeypox in Denton County. I don't remember the exact number, 1,000 something. People hospitalized with COVID. That's how serious it is. But yet, DCTA said, come, mingle, get close with the people. This is not showing any respect. I've spoken at meetings. There is, I give respect. I state facts. If I make a misstatement, I apologize immediately. Okay? The public does not get that back from DCTA. Certain board members, okay? You cannot demand respect. You have to give respect. Okay? We have a bus company that is sabotaging their own buses. It makes absolutely no sense. You're funneling millions of dollars to a private entity. Okay, public comments. We need to be allowed to call in public comments. And when a board member disrespects anyone from the
Ms.
public,
Greco, Here's 3 minutes.
thank you, I will finish my last sentence. And that board member needs to make a public apology and be ashamed of themselves. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Our next speaker is Paula J. Richardson of Denton. Richardson. You have 3 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a bus operator. I've been working for DCTA, TNDC when it was there, and now NTMC for the last 7 years. I want to speak on regular agenda item number 4, and that's discuss and consider approval of inflation adjustment compensation for DCTA and NTMC staff. First of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the drivers for having this on the agenda from March, April, May, actually May of this year. Our hours, most of our hours have been reduced to 32 hours from at least 40 hours a week. And it's been very difficult. As you know, COVID is still going on, as Ms. Greco just mentioned. Every time we go in the grocery store, the prices are higher for everything. And it makes it very difficult when you're making less salary. So I would encourage, and I'm very hopeful on behalf of all the drivers that this agenda item is approved because it is very much needed. And also I want to say to the NTMC board, I understand it's contingent upon their approval also. I just hope that they would hear my words that I'm speaking now, because I won't be able to go to their meeting. But I just hope they would able to hear my words now and also approve that for all the drivers and all the other office staff that are working so hard to keep things going at this time. Thank you very much for your hearing me out this morning. I appreciate it.
That is all the speaker cards I have at this time. There's no other public hearing. No people want to speak for us. Then we'll move on to our consent agenda. These are typically items that are customary and usual in nature and are taken as one vote unless the board member wishes to forward one for second consideration. Or what is your pleasure?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Motion second. Consent agenda. I'll take a vote now. All in favor, please call that saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That's been passes. We'll now move on to our regular agenda. The first agenda is conduct a public hearing for the proposed FY 2023 operating capital budget. So I am now opening a public hearing for DCTA's proposed FY 2023 operating and capital budget. Allow forward to receive public input on the proposed budget. As posted on the agenda, any person who wishes to address the board of directors regarding the proposed FY 2023 operating and capital budget may do so at this time. Wait for your name to be called before speaking. So I think first we're gonna turn it over to Paul Christina. I'm gonna allow you to go ahead and do the presentation and then we'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amanda Riddle, our Senior Manager of Budgets, is going to walk us through a high-level overview of the budget that's proposed for FY 23. As you recall, we went through a budget workshop back in June where every one of these items was laid out in detail. Some action items were taken from that discussion that we'll touch on here. So we'll talk about things that have evolved since that June budget workshop. Otherwise, we'll stay at a high level and move through as efficiently as we can. Okay, Amanda, go ahead.
Morning. He covered, I mean, you guys, we had brought this in detail at our June 16th budget workshop. Today, we're presenting the final proposed budget. We're going to highlight the revisions that have been made. And then in September, we will bring the final version to the board to consider for adoption. I want to point out on pages 29 through 39 of your packet, there are 7 exhibits. You have the long-range financial plan. This incorporates all elements of the budget and shows the proposed ending fund balance each year. You have a change in net position combined statement, which has columns for DCTA and NTMC separately. And then you have a change in net position by function. Some of these schedules are also at your place. I printed the ones that are large scale since they are too hard to read in your packet. I do want to point out on the change in net position by function, last month and the prior month, we always had it bus operations all together. And this month's version, we've broken out bus services and mobility services separately. So bus operations includes bus admin, fixed route, access, UNT, and North Texas Express service. And then the mobility services section, you can see is quite small, large dollars, but not a lot of line items. That's our Lyft, taxi, Go Zone, and then our mobility as a service, which includes Coppell and Van Pool. So I wanted to point out that difference. On the next slide, this is an overview, a DCTA budget summary of the expenses proposed in FY 23. It's broken out by the different services that we offer. This budget that we are bringing today does reflect the service reduction that was voted on in July by the board. That eliminated routes 2, 4, and 5, as well as modifications to 3, 6, and 7. The overall operating change is an increase of $574,000 from what you saw in June, and we will touch on those differences. Major drivers, revenues and expenses. Again, I'm going to touch on the things that have adjusted. A lot of these did remain the same. Grant funding decreased by a small amount. That's just due to the bus operations decrease. It's a direct offset, and also a capital project that we'll go over. The budget decreased as well from what was presented in June. Another thing that adjusted, Go Zone service increase. We have included $186,000 additional in funding for the proposed Louisville area expansion that was brought in July, and we have more detailed slides in the coming presentation. As a reminder, sales tax revenue, since it's our largest revenue, is proposed at a 4% escalation in FY 23 as well. So material operating expenses that were adjusted following the June budget workshop. This highlights the July Connect service change and the budget impact it did have. With those service changes, there was an overall decrease of 380,000. Labor was 228,000 of that, and then fuel was at 152,000. And this is a slide that was presented in July. This was the VIA proposal that was discussed that would expand the Louisville service area zone. VIA projects that with a total not to exceed 2% increase to service, we would be able to increase ridership by approximately 14,000. This option again has been included in this proposed operating budget with a total budget impact of $186,000. That brings total VIA service hours in FY 23 to a little over 235,000.
I'll speak to this one, Amanda. Thank you. One of the items that received feedback in the budget workshop in June was a question from the board around our proposed 3.5% budget increase or 3.5% budget allowance for staff merit increases. The board asked for staff to bring back alternatives that address the state of the economy and reflect what is happening in member cities and in the county. So on the left-hand side of the slide, what you see is the work that we've done alongside our partners at our member cities in Denton County to benchmark what is happening in those conversations. What we've seen is Denton and Highland Village have made a decision to do a one-time payment or pending decisions to do a one-time payment to adjust for inflation. While Louisville and Denton County, Louisville is considering, Denton County has opted not to do that. And then for the compensation increase for FY 23, what you see is a blend of across the board increases or cost of living increases. And then Louisville also adds a layer of merit increase atop it. And so we're going to talk about, or the board could, if you all wanted to undertake the one-time payment for inflation, we'll have an opportunity to do that later on in this meeting. What has been proposed right now is that one-time payment for inflation at $2,300. That's reflected through the benchmarking that you see on the right side of the slide with regard to groceries, transportation, fuel, and home utilities increases, all taken from Bureau of Labor Statistics for the DFW region. And what you see there at the very bottom is if adopted, that would impact the average NTMC employee about a 6% adjustment, an average DCTA employee about a 3% adjustment. And then accompanying that with this budget discussion is a 4% proposed across the board increase designed to make all of our positions more competitive in the marketplace as we move into FY 23. This is really, we set it up this way so the board could have discussion and choose their preferred alternative. If you chose, for instance, not to do the one-time payment, then you could see the impact of sliding the salary adjustment up the scale, perhaps, or any combination of factors or outcomes there. So with that, I'll happy to turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, for discussion and we're looking for direction from the board on, in this item, what is the preferred salary adjustment for the FY 23 budget, recognizing that later in the agenda, we have the opportunity to undertake, you'll have the opportunity to undertake the one-time payment decision.
You know, I will say that I like the idea of the one-time pay adjustment because it really will help. I mean, you know, you look at the people that are maybe in our lower salary ranges, that money really helps them. And I know my personal food budget has, you know, I'm spending several $100s more than I did at the beginning of the year for a month worth of groceries. So, and we all need money, we all need food. So I really like the idea of a one-time pay adjustment. It will help more proportionally for the people that really need that. So that's just my thoughts. I'm gonna see what other board members think. Yes.
A couple of questions. So first, are we discussing the option of doing both the FY 23 salary adjustment and also a one-time payment of $2,300?
Yeah.
Both are on the table.
Yes, because we wouldn't want you to make a decision or provide direction on the salary adjustment and then later make a decision on the one-time payment. They both need to be considered together.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that, and to be clear, the one-time payment that we're discussing would be for every employee of DCTA and every employee of NTMC. It's not like a merit pay thing.
Correct.
Okay.
And paid out of 2022 budget.
Okay. I like this approach. It probably wouldn't have occurred to me to do a flat amount rather than a percentage, but seeing it laid out this way and seeing that, you know, on average, NTMC employees have smaller salaries than DCTA employees and could probably that $2,300 is going to probably make a bigger impact for those employees than for the higher paid employees. So I'm comfortable with that. Yeah.
Maybe the lone voice on this, but that's okay too. I'd prefer to roll it into a salary adjustment and not a one-time payment. I just think fundamentally, I think that's a better plan to keep our employees long-term, to keep the pay scale adjusted. And I think everybody needs, you know, everybody's facing pressure, but I'd rather put it into an annual recurring adjustment than a one time. I'd rather invest it into the pay plan. There's an option here to do both, but I would prefer not to do. That's just me. I prefer not to do a one time issuance.
So if we do that, what percentage, because 4% won't capture that, but if we went to 5.5, would there be a percentage that would capture? I get the 2,300, but I'm thinking the total number. What's that 2,300 number in total?
I think the bottom line there is 298 or
269.
269.
Okay. So is there what I hear Andy saying is that he wants to take 269,000 and actually put that into the comp plan rolling forward.
Yeah.
So is there a salary adjustment range that gets us there?
So
I will just add a comment. The merit that is at the top, that salary adjustment alternative, that is based on how it's currently set up. It's DCTA employees, and for NTMC, those numbers only reflect non-operators because they're separate.
Okay.
So the one-time payment information, that is all like across the board, all. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah,
because it is different.
It's a lot of math to do
Yeah.
like with no lead time. I
Yeah.
get that.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I think maybe I was misinterpreting that. So the FY23 salary adjustments would be merit increases, not cost of living adjustments.
no, what we're proposing is the FY23 salary adjustment would be across the board, level up for everybody.
Okay,
But what Amanda is saying is, when it comes to pay to operators at NTMC who are under union labor agreements, their pay is fixed by the labor agreement. And so if you do that, if you slide it up the scale further, you're touching the non-unionized.
okay, yeah. So increasing the FY23 salary adjustment without doing a one-time payment would not benefit operators, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Yeah, then that answers my question. And I think that I would favor staff recommendation on both fronts.
The other thoughts?
I'll go over that again about the contract with
Amanda, okay.
I'm like, I don't know enough about it.
So the union labor agreement speaks to how much the operators are paid. And so our adjustment here would be,
Does their agreement prevent them from getting more money?
I don't know the answer to that question offhand. But we could come back with it.
So go ahead and finish your thought.
So the way that this is set up is this would be the non-union employees would get the salary increase on the NTMC side. Because the unionized.
there are employees that we appreciate and would like to have here as well.
Correct.
So I don't think they should be punished and not get it as well.
Agree, and we just in the past, in the budget process, have treated those two buckets separately, but if the board provided that direction, we could come back with the plan for that to happen.
Another
It's
question.
important to treat people equitably. I think that's the value, and if we could review that on a break or something and come back, I think that would be appreciated.
So, and keep in mind, it's NTMC's employees that we're discussing, so that money would be going to NTMC for NTMC to distribute that to their employees.
Correct.
So, I just to think before we get to that, so what you're saying, and I think it's a good point for the whole board here. This action would basically set aside $202,000 that would go to the MPMC. We are suggesting that they distribute as a one-time pay adjustment. But truly, that board has the discretion to distribute as they fit.
Correct.
Yes. Lester.
Yeah, and I'm trying to make this simpler in my head. What we're talking about with Board Member Eads's comment is we're actually talking about a 7% moving forward. The 3% down there on the DCTA line plus the green box 4% up at the top. So we'd actually be considering a 7% go forward in perpetuity.
I'm not sure that's quite the right.
No,
way
just
to do it. Look
okay.
at it.
Only for this year, but you're right. The point is, when you move it all up by that, then.
Well, yeah,
every year following-
that 3% is now every year following.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, okay, but to make it look like that, I'd be talking about an actual 7% across the board, and that keeps going. It's not a one-time. That's a 4% across the board plus 3% one time.
Well, I think we gotta be careful because you're mixing, in the vernacular, I remember used to calling it recurring and non-recurring dollars.
Right.
You're mixing.
Right.
Non-recurring with recurring.
But if we do Andy's proposal, it's 7% recurring.
I don't, I haven't heard that from finance.
No,
if that
no, but-
equivalent-
It's more like
equivalent.
4.3%.
Okay,
Yeah. That's what I'm waiting to hear back from.
got it, because we're doing a different bucket there. I got it. Okay,
I think that the inflation issues that we're dealing with are going to be baked in to the economic model that we're going to be operating in.
Yeah.
That was my point, was to, I think, I would put it into the pay scale and let it roll forward. That would, I'm only one voice on here.
I don't disagree with that. And if it's a difference between 4% and 5%, I think, I'm seeing what Denton County is doing, but I've also seen what a lot of other municipalities are doing, and, I've seen up in the 7s. I've seen down in nothing much below 4. So I don't think we're out of the box by any means by doing what Andy's recommending.
What would the percentage be? If we rolled it in. What was, someone said 7, someone said 4.3. I mean, so what is
estimate
what
about
is the math?
4.3,
What is
but
the math?
Yeah, if you do 4.5, it's 131. And 117, so I'd be doing 117 plus 66, which would be 170, 183.
What does 5% get?
okay, but 66 is the total cost, not the additional. So it would be like, so if we're looking at 4% increase for DCTA, $117,071 plus $2,300 is $119,371 would then be like the average salary for a DCTA employee. So then what percentage increase is 102 or from baseline to 119,371? I don't know what the current average
Yeah.
is
so
for
it'd be
DCTA.
4.2.
What's 97% of
We
102?
need to figure out what the payroll is times
Yeah, that's-
5%. So, and then see it back into the numbers that way.
Would it be? Would it help staff if we were to table this item for a few minutes, move on to the next item, and give you the opportunity to crunch some numbers for a few minutes, and then come back, if that
If
helps.
we can understand the numbers that we're crunching, what I think I'm hearing is that you're looking for, what is the equivalent if you bake that $2,300 into the annual salary adjustment and ensure that it is able to be and is distributed to union and non-union employees at NTMC.
Well, that is one option. A second option would be bake it in, but let's pull out the unionized portion of it and just give them some smaller one-time adjustment. If that's the way that we make it equivalent. That's
Okay.
a lot of numbers to crunch.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that in a few minutes. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, and I have a question, just so to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, so the proposal that staff has brought forward is some type of permanent salary adjustment for NTMC and DCTA employees excluding union, because that increase will be negotiated separately, plus a one-time payment to all employees, including union employees. So I have two questions. Is it within the authority of this board to direct NTMC to use that proposed $202,400 to give one-time salary adjustments to union employees?
Is really ultimately NTMC's decision on how they want to distribute it, because it's their employees. And in their budget, I believe that what they submit to us, they were asking for that for a one-time.
In the last board meeting, they said they were in consideration.
Okay.
For a one-time distribution.
So it's not really within the authority of that board to direct how that is, but we have reason to believe that they will use it for the purpose that we're discussing
Well,
today.
and that's the reason they're requesting it from us in their budget, so it's gonna have to be used for that purpose.
Okay. And then my other question is it within the authority of this board to direct our contract negotiators to, ensure that we're giving union operators at least a 4% cost of living adjustment? Or is that something that's outside of our scope?
Again, that's what they're requesting in their budget, is that increase, right, for the 4%.
That's what's in their budget right now.
Okay,
that's
so
what
they're requesting it and they're planning on it, but we don't have the authority to ask them to do that. Is that correct?
You're not,
Okay.
you're not the ones making that decision, they are.
Okay,
You're just giving them the money for it. You can say, no, we're not gonna give you the money for it.
okay.
4% does not include operators though.
Okay. But there's a separate conversation happening at NTMC about giving a 4% cost of living adjustment to union operators? Is that what I'm hearing?
I can't answer that.
Okay,
question.
so we don't know what
I'm not
negotiations
aware.
are looking like. Okay,
I know budget wise, they look at their level salaries and then they do like an overall average salary, and that's how they come up with like their salaries and benefit piece, like how they build their budget. But as far as a percentage increase, I haven't been a part of any conversation.
thank
And I
you.
would like to also say the inflationary one-time payment that we're discussing too, we were proposing it come out of savings. So that money isn't built into the FY23 budget at all. We were assuming it would be part of savings that we've experienced in this current year's budget. So
That's not really impacting 2023 budget, because that's
not how we've,
Right.
not how we brought it forward.
Fund, salary savings will just.
And that's the way I see it in the sense that the one-time payment is for work, it's for what they've lived through. It's not for what they're gonna live through. We know that in our 2023 budget, the salary adjustment, and if obviously you look at Highland Village, we believe in taking care of our staff. The salary adjustment is for the 2023 budget, but I feel like that one-time payment is for what they've already experienced, and it's that one time, and then the salary adjustment comes for however, what we can agree to do. Obviously, we can't tell NTMC what to do, but we can say that the board strongly suggests that this be under there. So,
I would just respectfully say that inflation and costs rarely go down. And so we'd be looking at the same thing next year, all these one-time payments, off payments, and I think it would be better for the employees to put it into a salary plan that would be long-term, going towards their retirement and everything else that would be calculated off of that than just one-time payments. That's just me. You know, y'all may choose to do other things, but I think that's not going to be reflected really when people are doing pay scale analysis, you know, and are calling other agencies and figuring out what the pay scale is, or it's not going to be posted when people are looking to come on board here. They're going to be looking to see what that, you're not going to be documenting that. Oh, by the way, last year we gave this much, the year before we gave that much. You're not going to be doing that. You're going to be looking at what is that starting salary and how does that compare to the neighboring agency? And I think this is just me. I would rather us work it through the pay plan long term. I think it's an easier way to compare to other agencies, to other sister agencies, to other public entities. You know, that's, and I think in the long term, it'd be better for the employees.
well, can I just
Baked
ask
out. That
one
would just be me.
question? What do the employees want?
They want to check right here.
How do they, I mean. I'm just asking.
Yeah, do they, would employees rather have a one-time payment or would they rather have a permanent pay increase going forward?
We've not done any internal surveys.
And, well, and also like,
If I could just say, you know, there's been a lot of conversation around salaries and all that sort of stuff. And so we wanted to be really sensitive about simply benchmarking off of what our member cities and the county is doing so that the board could make a decision. And so we're open. Lots of options. And so that's where we are.
so I think that I agree with Judge Eads that increasing base pay is going to be most helpful in terms of particularly recruitment, which we need to do, right? At all levels, from operators all the way up to executive level staff, we need to be focused on recruitment. In terms of looking forward to inflation, I mean, it's true that there's no reason to think we're going to experience a deflation, but the current inflation rate is 8.5%. Google is telling me, like as of today, you know, it's probably not going to stay at 8.5%. It might drop down to 4% next year, in which case it would make sense to continue the 4% salary adjustment, but maybe not the one-time payment. The one-time payment gives us flexibility in our budget to say, okay, inflation's very high this year. We need to give our people more this year. Maybe we don't need to increase it quite as much next year because maybe inflation will be a little lower next year. Maybe it won't. And that still gives us the flexibility to continue either doing one-time payments or continue doing additional base pay increases. Plus, as we've just established, we don't have any idea what the contract negotiations look like at NTMC between NTMC and the Amalgamated Transit Union. We don't know if operators are going to be getting a 4% increase. We don't really even have any indication that they're planning to. We do have an indication that NTMC is planning to give, or it has an intention to give, a $2,300 one-time payment to all of their employees, including operators. And so that seems like a safer bet to make sure that we are taking care of our operators. Not that I think NTMC is going to be negotiating in bad faith, but we just don't have any kind of guarantee that that operators are going to get the same base pay adjustment that we approve for other employees. So that would be my concern with rolling the one-time payment in with the salary, the base salary adjustment. But I agree that rolling it in would help with recruitment and retention. Yeah.
I can tell you when I used to be at staff level, I would prefer what the judge wants. I always would prefer to get the larger because it's recurring, you build on that, all your additional your benefits expand with that. But I also work with salaried hourly employees that were much lower down. And for them, buying food was a big deal. And for them also, a one-time pay adjustment, percentage-wise for them is much greater. So over time, I kind of said, okay, I kind of moved toward preferring the one-time pay, even though it didn't benefit me as well personally, it did benefit the agencies as a whole, the staff I had that was at a lower level.
I just think that a one-time payment, the employees, it might sound well and good in the fall of 2022, but they're losing the compounding effect. They're losing it's a short-term game, but they're instead of getting a 5%, and then that's baked in. And the next year, if you get a 5%, it's 5% on top of that 105% for the year before. I mean, so they're missing out on the compounding effect. So, I mean, it's I think it's easier, quicker fix. I think it's a disservice in the long term because of the compounding effect. You base lots of things on the compounding effect.
I completely agree, I understand that.
Paul, quick question, just for clarity on the whole picture. Is there a longevity pay policy for staff at all or any of that?
But can you define what you mean by
Longevity for, or, a one-time payment for number of years of service toward the end of the fiscal year or anything like that, based off a number of months, number of years of service?
Okay.
Sorry. We do have an anniversary pay of $100 for each year of service. On the 1 year of your service, you get $100 on your paycheck.
But it's only $100 a year.
Year 2 would be 200, year 3 would be
No,
300.
sir, it's $100 every year.
It's not the traditional longevity pay you think about a lot of the counties and the cities have, they don't have that.
I think it's a great thing, Jody, that the body ought to consider, because I think that rewards tenure and retention. So make it look forward, and it can help maybe address this as well. I love that.
Okay, so I'm trying to get to a point where we can decide on. We can do it lots of ways. Obviously, staff recommending 4% and a one-time pay adjustment equivalent to $2,300, and that's $269,000. So the board can change these numbers up. We can go to 4.5% and make the one-time pay 0, or we can drop that to whatever number you guys want to do that. We can direct staff to turn it into a longevity pay, if that's the desire of the board.
That, Mr. Chairman, that sounds like a pretty large program that we could certainly take up in 23.
Yeah.
That would be tricky to do on a fly.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Thoughts?
I'm happy with what staff is proposing.
I am as well. I think, even though, I mean, there are some drawbacks. I think the way I weigh it, I think having a one-time payment is the way to go this year. In addition to at least a 4% base pay increase.
Well, I'm okay with going with the 4% and the one-time pay. Other thoughts?
I will go ahead and go with consensus at that point.
And I will not, because I do not believe it's a decision that truly benefits the employees, short-term or long-term, or the agency. We're trying to be competitive with other sister agencies. And I don't think that this is I think it's short-sighted, in my opinion, and it's an easy fix. It sounds easy, but I don't think that I think it's short-sighted for the employees. I'm sorry for them.
you have direction. moving forward with this.
So we're gonna put a 4% adjustment into into the budget for 23.
And for the record, I would have done more than 4%.
4% is already in there. It's already baked in.
I would have done more than 4%, so.
Can I ask a question for the chair? I'm very open to, in addition to having a one-time payment, discussing a larger base salary adjustment. Is there, is there interest among other members of the board in having that discussion about maybe doing 4.5 or 5% base pay increase plus a one-time $2,300 payment?
Is there? Let me just ask it this way, is there any board? What would the board like to go to 4.5%?
I would.
I'd go a nickel.
I'm not, if you are gonna do the other one, I'm not, I mean, it's either or with me. I'm not doing,
You're not doing both. You're not doing both, even though.
I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do.
So the one-time pay doesn't impact next year's budget. That's from this year's savings. The 4.5 would be 2023 budget.
Just because we have money in the bank doesn't mean we need to spend it. We also need, we have needs next year. We'll be having the same conversation next year.
I agree with that. I think 4%, you're definitely gonna be next year. Looking at a 5 to maybe 6 if you, that's, I absolutely agree. That's where that's happening in the private sector. It's in public sectors at what, 53% of the jobs that were lost to COVID have come back in the public sector, 103%.
And I'm curious, how many jobs were lost here at DCTA through this bad couple of years? My guess is 0. Right? When the private sector and all these people who are paying the bills around here had tough times, our taxpayers who are paying for this, they all had financially tough times, are having financial tough times now. I think this agency weathered it very well, and I doubt anybody was laid off. That's a question, it's not a statement. I mean,
We did experience layoffs in the COVID-19
how many?
period. I'd have to get that answer for you.
I doubt it was significant.
All right, Mayor Gilmore has said that he favors 5%. I would be comfortable with 5% as well. In addition to a one-time $2,300 payment.
I'm okay with 4.5. I just don't know how much each one goes up.
I'd rather do 5. My idea would be that we stay at 5%, or that we keep everything like board member Eads has talked about. If we're gonna go higher on the percentage, I want it baked in. I understand the one time, so if we're gonna do one time, then we're gonna have this conversation again. But I mean, if the consensus is that we're gonna do a one-time plus percent, then I'm good with the 4% the one time.
I think our greatest commodity are our employees across the board. And anytime I've considered things from that perspective, I've not been wrong. You know, things are going to be as they are. If we do the 2,300, it's coming out of this budget. If we do for next year, I understand the baking in, but we are not an agency that's going to be hiring hundreds of people. And I think that more than the salary, I can say, at least from experience as mayor, more than the salary, what our staff considered was their treatment. And so I mean, and it's obviously continued. I mean, 5% Highland Village is doing, right, Paul? Yeah. So this is why I feel like there should be a benefit now and a baked-in benefit, which I don't think at the number of employees we have is going to be that big of an issue. So at our greatest commodity being our staff, I feel like kind of what we talked about and agreed to. Chair, I just have one question. What did you say? Did you say 4.5?
I said, let's, how about 4.5? I just stepped it up.
Right,
Yeah.
but would that include the 2,300?
Yeah, I was assuming we would still do the 2,300. It's coming out of this year's year-end savings. It's not impacting the 2023 budget.
I have a question that staff might not know off the top of their head, but might be able to find the answer to. So we're looking at like average salaries at NTMC and DCTA. Can anyone get us a number for the annual salary of employees who are making the lowest wage, employees at the bottom, all the way at the bottom of the pay scale?
With time, yes, we can.
Okay, okay. Because that would help me to see, you know, if we're looking at the average salary, even a 4.5% base pay increase would get those folks more money than a one-time, right? But that's not true if we go down to, you know, if we've got someone in the organization who's making $30,000 a year, the $2,300 one-time payment is more money than even the 4% salary adjustment. So I mean, if we've got employees who are making $30,000 a year, then I feel like I'm going to hold fast on saying I want to see that $2,300 one-time payment. But if we don't have anybody who's making a salary that small, or then I could get on board with maybe doing away with the one-time payment and going up to 4.5 or 5%. I would, if we're doing away with the one time, I would want to see 5% going forward.
This is why I never got into HR.
Yeah.
Because I'm most concerned about those folks all the way at the bottom of the pay scale
So
who
it's reflected
are
in the
really
percent-
struggling to buy their groceries.
It's as reflected in the percentage compensation adjustment there between DCTA and NTMC. The average salary at DCTA is about twice what it is at NTMC. So
70,000,
It's about,
about 40,000, 80,000.
okay, so you did 70,000 times 5%, I was saying that's $3,500 increase. That's what
Compounded,
I'm saying.
yeah.
compounded.
And then it gets
Yeah, it
compounded.
gets compounded.
And then it gets compounded.
So I'm
I think
seeing
we're all in agreement
average.
we want to take care of the employees.
Yeah, I mean,
We all agree, we want to take care of.
The argument is how much,
Right.
which is a great place to be.
How much?
And which format, yeah.
Some initial now.
If it's 50, if we did 50, if a $50,000 employee comes at 5%, it's $2,500.
Mhm,
I mean, so that's kind of what we're,
that's what we're talking about, yeah.
I mean. and I
But there
think-
are-
I think
but-
most of them are probably over 50,000.
My math is telling me that the average NTMC employee is currently earning about $39,003 a year. And for those folks, if we're going to do 4%, we also need to do 2,300 in addition to that, because 4% isn't very much for those folks.
Did we do a one-time last year? Something in my brain makes me think we did a one-time COVID adjustment or something. No, okay. Then it's just my faulty memory. Perfect.
Well, bus operations got COVID pay.
They,
for
I know they
specific
got
days,
for specific months.
but no one time.
There's no one, okay. Thank you.
Yes, just an example, I guess, or another option. Maybe you guys go with the 5%. I think that helps everybody out, obviously, long term, but maybe you reduce the one time to like $1,000 for everybody. That's something we did at our company and everybody loved that. And especially the lower level that everybody got it was great. Even the higher level, fortunately, the executive didn't get it, but everybody else did. And they all thought it was awesome. So maybe you reduce the one time down.
It's probably a magic number. There's probably a number there that
Helps everybody move through the pay plan. I think that's what we want to do. Get everybody moving through the pay plan. And I'd move that pay scale up too, so that it's more attractive for the front line and move everybody up and then do something like that. There's probably a good compromise position there.
What would be a number that you would think would be a good one-time pay?
Well, so my napkin math, an employee making $30,000, if they were to get a 5% increase, that would mean $1,500 additional dollars. If we added to that a $1,000 one-time payment, that would get those folks above that $2,300 baseline that we've sort of thrown out there.
I like that.
Okay, 5% of the $1,000, we still have a $1,000 adjustment.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with
Thank
that.
you, Mark.
That would mean at least a $2,300 increase for everyone, including,
Correct.
or well, it could potentially mean only $1,000 for operators. Unless NTMC also negotiates for 5%.
True, and that would be something that the staff, we can certainly have the staff take it to the MTMC. Our interim director is on the MTMC board, so we can convey that message. So I'm kind of hearing maybe 5% for 2023 and a $1,000 one-time pay adjustment.
With a strong urging to NTMC to also take that 5% to operators, because we need to focus on recruiting and retaining operators.
Is everybody in agreement with that? 5%.
Yeah, and so we would give this direction to the NTMC or to the general manager who can communicate with his NTMC board and take this up in the next NTMC meeting.
So
You would have to then recalculate. We give you that direction, you would recalculate how much money you transfer over. to
It would affect the
NTMC.
NTMC budget, correct?
Okay.
Which
Are we having to decide this today?
we need direction on what's the percentage increase.
I think we need to look at I'm with you, but I think we need to look at somebody needs to crunch the math. So that's just the concepts. I think we need to.
TJ, what was it?
I was just curious when the 4% came, did that come off of a revenue number? Or did we just go, this is what other folks are doing and grab it?
An attempt to benchmark off of the rest of Denton County.
Every other prior year, we've either done, I think we've done 3.5.
So this is what I would suggest we do. We give direction staff to go forward with 5%. Do a $1,000 pay adjustment. We table item 4 and let you bring that back to us next month with the numbers.
Well, but we need to pass a budget next month.
Well, the budget would pass up on 5%. And the one-time pay is just coming out of year-end savings.
Right.
It's not.
Okay, understood.
Does that sound reasonable to everyone? Okay.
So we'll adjust the budget for 5% pay increase in FY 23.
Is that 5% plus 1,000?
But those are separate fiscal years.
We're gonna keep it.
I
Okay.
didn't sound that way to me, because I thought you were talking about doing possibly the one time for everybody out of this current fiscal year of 1,000. And then for next fiscal year, I think getting to the judge's point, if you did a 5% plus $1,000, they get the benefit of that going forward. Or you're just talking about a 5% for next year?
Yeah, just.
Okay.
like-
I think it started in that vein.
Yeah.
Correct.
People would walk away from it.
So budget will reflect 5% across the board for 23.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring back next month an agenda item for consideration of this $1,000 payment with a year-end $1,000 inflationary adjustment and with the impacts overall to the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
I would request, I think the board would like this. I'd like to see the brackets of the employees, like how many are in the 40,000 to 50,000. I think it'd be good for us to see what is that?
Whether they be an NTMC or.
Yes,
DCTA,
both entities. I'd love to see how many 30,000 employees do we have, 40,000, 50,000, how many executives. I think it'd be good for us to know that as far as a head count.
I-
We do want to make meaningful.
And it's
movement.
field positions or all positions?
Everybody, I think.
But.
But
Field
Oh,
or-
filled and vacant. Yeah.
Filled
yeah,
and
yeah,
vacant,
Budgeted positions.
Okay.
Budgeted positions.
And can I add to that? I'd love to see, if we're talking about like average, salaries, in any type of conversation going forward, I'd love to see a median instead of an average. Just because, what we were just talking about. Well, we know that the average at NTMC is $39,003. Are there people making 30,000? Are there people making 20,000? How do the extremes skew that average? I think a median would be more helpful.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
We can continue now with the rest of the presentation.
We'll review the expanded level projects that were adjusted or added since the June budget workshop. So our total FY 23 expanded level project request is at $8 million. The stars on this slide show the items that were adjusted. We are missing one, but it went down lower. So item number 3, the Swiftly Transit Platform. In June, it was at 1.184, so that has reduced now to 896,000. We have added a non-revenue vehicle for the Director of Safety and Compliance, and we'll go in, we have additional slides. Marketing, we've increased the enhanced marketing and advertising initiative from 250,000 to 300,000. And then we have added an on-call planning services EOP of 500,000. So the Director of Safety and Compliance, this position will be required to investigate incidents at the site and possibly transport operators to obtain post-accident testing as required by FTA. So staff determined that a support vehicle would be needed for this position. So we have added a $45,000 support vehicle into the budget for FY 23. And this will be 100% grant funded. So no local match.
I gotta commend somebody. That was a great way to get that slide to work.
Oh, that's sideways. I think that was Paul.
And on the grant funding too, that deserves commendation as well.
Again, the marketing and advertising strategic review in June, when we went over it, it was at 250,000 and that has been increased to 300,000. And the new on-call planning expanded level project for a total of 500,000. Paul can speak more to that.
So there's gonna be a number of things that have come up over the course of between the summer and now into next year that we'll need to be able to provide labor on as we think about taking our dashboards to have real-time safety service ridership metrics front and center in everything that we do. As we look at the NTMC organization, what are the alternatives for moving forward with the bus contract or outsourcing or whatever those things might be. And so, and then also as we think about expanding our services and increasing ridership across the service area, our cost allocation model is central to that. The cost allocation model was developed by TTI several years ago. It needs to be reworked in order to understand what is the right amount of cost that needs to be put on our services so that they're competitive and marketable to the cities among us who don't have DCTA services yet. And so this money would be utilized to those ends. Ultimately, any contract that's executed under this that would be in excess of the CEO's authority would come to this board for approval. So you have that visibility and control. But we found it prudent to provide some budget space to be able to do those things next year.
The overall capital budget summary, the proposed capital budget for FY 23 comes in just at just under $35 million. The largest projects being the TRIP program. In FY 23, that totals 21.2 because it involves 2 years. It involves a rollover as well as the FY 23 portions that are proposed, as well as the joint rail operations facility at 6 million. And that project is fully reimbursed by DART.
So Amanda, can I ask you a question? What? If the $6 million is reimbursed, when do we see that in next year's budget on the revenue side? Is that how that?
We have it slated. Gosh, I have to look. Yes, we have 9 million actually slated. So this year, we have a little under 2.8 million that we are anticipated receiving from DART for the first, like the design portion. And then in FY 23, we actually have 9.3 million for the entire construction portion. The expense is spread between FY 23 and FY 24, just because it'll cross. I think it's more of a calendar year and not a fiscal year. So we have some of the expense rolling over into the.
It pops up in future
Mhm.
years.
And,
Yeah.
and that is largely a guess at this point, and so we may, depending on how the project proceeds, we may have to come back to the board and say, okay, we gotta move some money between years, but it'll all be there.
So this is just a screenshot that you really can't read on the slide, but you have this in front of you, the change in net position. This does not include depreciation. And again, this highlights, it's got the G&A, bus operations, mobility services and rail operations separated. So it's a little bit easier to see where the expenses are hitting. The revenue, you also have a revenue detail schedule. It's not printed, it's just in the packet. And that breaks out the revenue amongst the different services we provide. And the mobility services, since this is a new section to see, this includes, again, Go Zone, UNT Lift, Frisco, Coppell, Lift, and Vanpool. And really the only expenses that hit in here are the purchase transportation. And then we have some credit card fees related to the Go Zone service.
Did you say lift?
Or the lift contract for Capel and
We use Lift for UNT, Coppell,
Frisco.
and Frisco and Alliance
Okay.
portions. And then this is the final slide. This is just a 4-year outlook. You've seen this before. It's been tweaked a little with the different changes that we went over, but as you can tell, our net cash is positive each year. So if you have any questions. I feel like I went through pretty fast, but you have seen this before, so we didn't want to go over every single detail.
So I did have a couple, 3 questions, if that's okay, just for my clarity. Do we have any idea on the impacts to driver count based on the decisions for Connect service from last month?
I do.
Yeah.
Well, for driver counts, at least for the budget side, from the finance side, we look at it based on service hours or pay hours. Since they're seasonal and part-time. In June, when we brought the presentation forward, we had operators at 50, and then today, based on service hours, they're at 43. And again, that's just a calculation. That's because there are more operators than that, but
So that's the
like full-time
anticipated
equivalent.
in January will be 40, we'll be moving the system to 43.
Well, but that's on the service hour equivalent, so in
Yeah.
reality, it's about 2 to 3.
Right.
So
No,
operator
yeah,
position.
and I'm finally getting into my head how the service,
Yeah.
so understood. So
Mhm.
So that, okay. Thank you. On slide 23, am I reading this right, that we're depleting our reserves by 12.2 million? I think it was a slide on 23 that I looked at. It may be a slide plus or minus if you guys have made changes to the deck.
By 12 million?
Yeah, and I may have misdone the math.
Oh, I bet you might have been looking at one that this doesn't have depreciation.
Right.
Our change in that position is. Yes, you're correct, because our change in that position is 22.7,
Okay,
and then we have the transfer of capital projects.
okay. And then I'm trying to remember why we do it this way, so I'm hoping you can help me on the trip funding. Why do we include that as revenue
On this slide,
on slide 24.
okay, this, and me and Paul have talked about this. When we put this slide together, when we only show it as an expense, basically that expense comes from, it's a calculation of
Right.
the net available funding from the previous year. So in essence, that's funding that trip program for the following year. So on this, we're just showing that as revenue we're holding as trip funding. Does that make sense from the previous year?
Carry forward.
It's,
Yeah.
I know it's carry forward. I'm just still trying to get better at accounting. Good Lord.
Well, we don't actually show, it's just more of the long range financial plan, how it hits.
Okay, so good. Okay, so I think I'm understanding that right. And then on slide 24, the 4-year outlook.
Mhm.
Has that been incorporated into the long range financial plan?
Yes.
Okay. Because they kind of give me two different outlooks as to the future. One's kind of dark and the other's kind of bright and sunny. And I'm not sure if you get that same picture.
Well, I mean, the difference will be, obviously, the 4-year outlook doesn't carry into account like the beginning fund balance, like in our reserves and things like that. It's
Okay.
just like what's actually happening that year.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's probably the difference.
I think that's probably part of
A
it,
lot.
but right.
With this, we're trying to demonstrate that we're spending less than we make. In the long range financial plan, we're spending less than we make, plus here's all the stuff that we're carrying with us year after year.
Okay. I think that gives me a better picture of how I need to be interpreting those, so I'm not too far off base.
If you have more specific questions, let me know.
I try and stay out of the specifics.
I know it's confusing though, since we're showing different information and different.
Well, and that's the thing,
Different
right?
slides.
I mean, the 4-year kind of gives us kind of a pretty narrow margin,
Mhm.
which is fine as long as we're aware of it. But I know when we make certain assumptions over time, it gets really dicey.
Oh,
On
yeah.
those
once
out
it
years.
compounds in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
It's still a public hearing. So is there anybody in the audience that would wish to speak on this?
To comment about the operators and how, I don't know the lady's name, who said that we get a bonus every year. You don't get a- Oh, okay.
If you're gonna come to this.
You can come to the point, get your name for the record, and then.
Okay, my name is Paula Richardson. I'm a former executive board officer for ATU Local 1338, as well as being an operator at DCTA and TMC for the last 7 years. I can speak a little bit more to the average salaries and what my coworkers make. My seniority position is, I think I'm number 25 out of about 49 of us right now. And I make top pay, which is $21.55 an hour. That's the high part of the scale. The low scale is starting out at $15 an hour. Operators that are just coming. And so I'd say more than half of my coworkers are making less than I am, which would put them around between $18 an hour, maybe. For the ones that are 25 to 49. Going to 49, they're going to be at the low scale, close to $16 an hour. So we obviously, like you said, we make much less than folks here at staff. Nobody I know makes $70,000 a year as an operator, nobody. Even working way a lot of overtime. So I appreciate you thinking about everybody else who makes a lot less at the NTMC. But also about the $1,000 one-time payment. I just don't think this board considers that we get our bonuses or one-time payment as a separate check. And right off the bat, if you pay us $1,000, we only see $600 of it. Because IRS takes their $350 right off the top. So if you're talking $2,300, we're not actually getting $2,300. We're getting maybe $1,800 after taxes. Because everything that we get as a bonus or extra is a separate check and it's taxed separately. So I just don't think $1,000, you know, it sounds great if we got actually $1,000, but we don't. We get taxed on that right off the top. And if we get $1,000, the most we'll see is maybe about $700. So I just I appreciate being able to speak on that. If the board has any other questions I can maybe answer, I'd be more than happy to. I wish I had thought to bring my contract with me this morning where I could show you our pay scale, but I didn't think to bring it. So
Surely there's one around here.
surely there's one around here. But if anybody has any questions, I can maybe answer as operator, as a union official, I could do my best to answer it right now. If I don't have the answer now, I can get it to you. So,
This was just public. You could provide public comment. to this, so
okay,
we appreciate it.
okay. I appreciate you letting me speak on that. I sure do. Thank you so much.
The public input is still open. Is there anybody else like to speak? Mr. Greco, please come up. We know your name, but please state.
Thank
for the
you.
record.
Eva Greco. And it just for clarification purposes, the bonus, as stated, was coming from savings account, not from budget. But I wrote it down as she said it. So if you're talking about pay increases and putting, instead of the bonus, just do pay increases at a certain percentage, isn't that like apples and oranges, kind of, in a sense? So if you can, because we were discussing it also, Patricia, the bonus is a separate thing, separate entity, affects the budget in no way. And then you're discussing pay increases, that should be two separate line items. So if somebody on the board can clarify that for us. And that was it.
Is there any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, I will now close the public hearing for the FY 2023 operating and capital budget. Further discussion from the board on this? And just for the audience, yes, there were two, we discussed two different items. One was the FY 2023 budget. And the other one had to do with a one-time pay adjustment, which would be from year-end savings. So just so the public understands that. This is an action item? No. No discussion. Okay, so that then concludes item 1. And we will now move on to item number 2. Scrolling fast.
Thank you, man.
Item 2, presentation discussion of the audit plan for FY 2022 financial statements presented by the plan. All right, this is by David Leininger and Flatline staff. Mr. Leininger.
Chairman, members of the board, good morning. As you know, you're annually audited, and this is the second year of Plant Moran auditing the agency. The good news there is that the same staff that started last year will now be auditing this year, which is certainly helpful. I have had the opportunity to talk to Amy and Keith. Obviously, my familiarity with this is truncated, if you can appreciate, but I will say that we have started the process of what's called interim. The auditor will speak to that, and that we've been given a checklist of things to put together. Staff will be working with the audit team during September to satisfy those information requests, which they're putting together, some audit tests and samples and so forth. And then they'll begin their regular full audit work later, I believe, in January. I'm sorry, in November, and then complete in January. But I can say I've visited with them. We are now working on the interim work with them, and at this point, I think I should turn the discussion over to the representatives of Plant Moran, assuming they're with us.
It looks like.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Szymanski. I'm a principal with Plant Moran and one of the leaders on DCTA's audit. I'm here to briefly discuss and lay out our plan for the audit, as well as open a line of communication between the auditors and the board to determine if there are any questions or concerns for us. There is a 3-page letter included in your packet that lays out our responsibilities and plan for the audit. Within that responsibility, on page number 1, I'd like to point you to the last couple paragraphs in which we point out a new accounting standard that is effective for the current fiscal year, GASB statement number 87 related to leases. This is an item the finance team is still determining the impact of. If it's significant, we will be required to include an emphasis of matter paragraph in our end of audit letter, just pointing out to the readers of the financial statements that there was a significant change during the year. If it turns out the change is not significant, we simply won't include that paragraph. In the overview and plan scope and timing of the audit section, we lay out the timing there in the first paragraph. So we're currently in the planning and preliminary information gathering phase. We will then proceed to risk assessment through October. And as David mentioned, the majority of our procedures will be performed in November and early December. And we expect to return to a board meeting in January to go over the draft results of the audit. Part of our planning phase is to identify any potential risks of misstatement in DCTA's financial statements. That's not to say that there have been issues in the past or we expect there will be issues this year, but if there were some riskier sections and those in which we'll plan to spend some additional time, these are the 3 items that we've identified. Number 1, the fact that there are additional funding, federal funding resources coming through DCTA and other transit organizations. So that creates risk both from a financial reporting perspective and a compliance with federal guidelines and regulations. So we will be forming tests of both, including looking at that spending as part of our single audit in which we test compliance with federal funding. Bullet point number 2 there, we recognize that there have been vacancies in the finance department, particularly over the last few months. And so we will ensure that proper internal controls were maintained during that period. And then lastly, related to the adoption of that new standard, verifying that the analysis and conclusions that the authority reached are accurate and consistent with that new standard. Moving on from that section, in order to gain an understanding of internal controls, we will ask DCTA staff to complete questionnaires for us, and we will perform testing to ensure that what they indicated was in place during the year was in fact what we see in terms of operating internal controls. We won't provide an opinion on internal controls, but if we do identify any significant issues, we will be including those in our written report at the end of the audit and presenting those to the board. Materiality is an important facet of each audit. We won't look at every dollar or transaction that ran through the authority during the year, but any that could potentially have a significant impact on the financial statements, as well as a sample of smaller items to ensure that everything is potentially subject to audit. And then lastly, information from you relevant to our audit. This is where the auditing standards ask us to open up the line of communication between the auditors and what they refer to as those charged with governance. So on the last page of the letter, we have some contact information if anyone would like to reach out to us after the meeting. And I know Ms. Morris Perkins also has email addresses and contact information for other members of the team. But if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to stop here and open it up to see if there are any questions or concerns for us right now.
Any questions for our representatives from Plant Moran? Looks like it's all good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Look forward to reporting back to you in a few months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Item 3. Discuss and consider approval of contract amendment number 8 to task order number 1 with River North Transit LLC via or GoGo service in the amount not to exceed $614,948 effective September 7th through September 30th, 2022.
Good morning. Good morning, Board of Directors. This item is a continuation of discussion and approval for an item that we brought to you last month regarding GoZone, regarding fiscal year and contract year alignment for year 1. After this presentation, staff recommends the board approve amendment number 8 to task order number 1 with River North Transit via effective September 7th through September 30th of 2022 in an amount not to exceed $614,948. Before I jump into that portion of the discussion, I will go through a brief performance update with GoZone service. Some of the graphs that you're all familiar with at this point. Ridership and service hours this month remained relatively steady as a result of demand and supply being relatively steady as well throughout the course of June and July. For context, May requests were at 82,755. June, we were looking at 95,271 requests. And in July, we were looking at 96,604 requests. At this point in the service and based on budget, we've actually reached stabilization of supply hours in the service. So we'll kind of hit the max of what we've added back in April. Looking forward, and not in this graph, I'd be remiss to not share what's going on in August this month. In August, we're actually tracking towards 105,000 requests, possibly beyond that, looking at possibly even 120,000 requests based on what we're seeing over the course of the past week. That's a 15 to 20% increase in demand over what we're looking at this month. We're attributing that demand. Early analysis is showing that there is quite a bit of demand showing around the UNT campus, around campus housing and other locations related to UNT. This month's service split was 24% Louisville Highland Village Zone on 76% in down. Utilization by month, similar story. Efficiency again, service out, riders per service hour on the service. Steady demand, steady supply in June and July made for about a 3.6 utilization. Breaking that out per zone looks at 4.1 rides per hour in Denton. Louisville Highland Village Zone looking at about 3.1 rides. Louisville Highland Village did actually see a small increase of 10% to 3.1. In August, based on the increased demand, naturally higher demand in higher density areas do lead to higher efficiency. Overall, in August, we're tracking towards 3.8 rides per hour. Most of those benefits coming from Denton, looking at 4.2 rides per hour in that region. We've seen in Denton peak utilization sometimes hit as high as 7 rides per passenger or per supply hour. Quality of service, similar story. June and July about the same, 5% seat unavailability. Wait times increased a little bit by about a minute. As we discussed before, these are the proposed wait times that are given to you by the app. Actual deviation on the wait times is about 2.6 minutes. So we're looking at a service system wide at about 21.3 minutes. August is looking a little bit different. The significant increase in demand is really impacting service quality in August. August seat unavailability is creeping up to 14.5% average as of yesterday. And wait times are creeping beyond 22 minutes at this point. The last several days tell an even higher story. Single day requests are looking somewhere near 4,500 to 5,000 requests per day. For context, our previous request highs were about 3,500 to 3,800 per day. We're looking at about a 35 to 45% increase in demand requests over on a day-by-day basis over the past several days. That's translating to seat unavailability at over 20% in Denton, with Louisville and Highland Village Zone sitting at about 10 to 12%. So all this to say, what we're doing in August, we're not sitting here just sitting back and looking at supply and demand and what the service is doing. We're working with VIA to really pinpoint where the origination and destination points are for these rides. Trying to get a deeper dive into the system, where folks are going, seeing if we have fixed routes in place that are not being utilized. Instead, possibly fixed route riders going GoZone instead. Once we analyze that and the routes and where the ridership is coming from, we can possibly looking at changing the way we do the whitelist points around the campus and those areas, making sure that we're not affecting folks disproportionately. But trying to maybe shift those riders that are possibly bypassing the UNT campus system onto GoZone. So that's currently what we're working towards for that particular item. More to come on that story. Any questions on anything regarding ridership and performance at this time?
Questions?
No questions, but I want to make sure that we're all recognizing what you've just laid out for us in the data, which is that, we put more money into the system. We increased revenue hours, and it helped a little bit at first, but now it has flattened out at a place where we have not reached our KPIs. We have not reached our goals, and school hasn't even started yet. So that's where we're at, that we're being asked to put more money into a system that has already reached capacity without students even being on campus. I don't see a solution to this other than expanding fixed route service.
And the best thing that we can do as staff is keep the board up to date on where we're headed and what
And
direction.
thank you for the clear data, yes.
I've just got a few comments to add, if that's okay. I appreciate the point there of reaching out and you're diving into the data to find out how we can make adjustments, because that's going to inform how we get a fixed route that actually makes sense. I mean, this is still amazing ridership that we didn't have with fixed route. So we need to just figure out how to get the fixed route to supplement and make sure that it's working properly as a combined system. Because I agree, at some point, you just can't. We all know how the systems work. So how do we get them to balance out? I will tell you that my experiences on GoZone over the last couple of weeks, because I do take it fairly regularly now. I am seeing an increase in school users, middle schoolers and up. And that is, I think, driven because you don't get a bus if you live within 2 miles of the school. And so kids are hopping on this thing and going to school so they don't have to battle car lines and all of that stuff. So it was cool. I love that we're teaching kids independence in that environment. And I think that's an important piece there. But I do see that load in people in Louisville finding it to be useful in that way. I also think that that's a conversation that we need to be having with the school district at some point for ridership and ideas. So I think that's important. As I've been out there, at least in the Louisville area, my ride shares have been full. I mean, we're constantly, people are full up in the vehicles and they're being utilized, which is great. What I am hearing from the drivers is that we're still having crunch time for that early morning get to work period, which I've experienced myself, longer than, a 15-minute wait time. But I get it. That's where we got to work with van pools or other solutions that make sense based on the data. And the other data point that I think for marketing moving forward is we really got to get people to not think about these as a taxi. I had one ride that literally had 2 situations where one woman began. She was very upset because she was being held hostage because the vehicle would not go from her pickup point to where she wanted, that there were other people that needed to be picked up along the way. And then we had another gentleman that popped on and went, well, I just live like I'm just a quarter mile away. I forgot my ID. Can we go over this way? And the rest of us are just sitting there in the van going, dude, it's not your taxi. If you want that, then it's an Uber or Lyft. But for marketing purposes, I think we could tell some better stories to maybe push away from that. If you want a private curb to curb, this is not it. But that's been my experience. I wanted to kind of give that anecdotally. The system's working. I think it's working well. I think it's not perfect. I think we have a lot of opportunities for improvement. But I've been very impressed with what it's doing for the Louisville Highland Village area. It is far exceeding our less than 200 riders a day, which is awesome.
Appreciate that feedback.
Other thoughts?
Just a quick briefing on safety performance. Last month, we had 2 FTA qualifying incidents, which has moved the 3-month trailing KPI to 0.49. Again, a reminder, this is a 3-month trailing average based on 100,000 miles. Non-FTA qualifying incidents are included here as well. That number is pretty flat from 4. And as of last month's 2 qualifying incidents, both incidents, the driver partner was found not at fault. Both are situations where either a driver was rear-ended, confirmed by the rider, as well as a driver partner who was hit after a yellow turn on the back ends of his vehicle. So just a reminder of what FTA incidents are: disabling damage to the vehicle, or where an individual receives medical attention away from the scene of the accident. Okay, moving forward to the GO Zone fiscal year and contract alignment discussion. The next 2 slides are going to be recap slides of July. Again, a reminder that the initial 2-year contract with VIA actually spans 3 fiscal years. At the end of GO Zone contract year 1, we have a small budget gap, or a budget gap of the last 3 weeks of the fiscal year. And let's see, and then those actual 3 weeks are not funded at this time. In July, we received board direction to maintain the current level of service and not affect service with a service dip in hours. So we've gone ahead and maintained that level of service since that direction. So this next slide, again, is a recap, but presents 3 different scenarios, one of which did not occur. This is the service gap dip that we are directed not to provide. And then we also have the 2 different scenarios here where we either transfer existing budget from FY23 or existing proposed budget for FY23 into FY22, or we just maintain the level of service that we have planned for FY23 and add additional service to FY22. This slide represents the additional investment required in year 1 to align, whether it be transferring from FY23 or adding additional investment into FY22. We're looking at, like we mentioned earlier, approximately $600,000 to add the service. And next slide, we're down again. Last month we had 3 different options. We're down to 2 options at this point. Again, transferring budget from FY23 to FY22. Increasing the FY22 budget by $611,663, bringing the FY23 budget down to $8.8 million from $9.4. This option gives no change to the combined FY22, FY23 budget, but does reduce service capacity by 1% relative to the current run rate that we have proposed. Given our current situation, I don't know that we really like to lean towards that route, but our actual recommendation, which I'll again bring up in the next slide, is for option 2, increasing the FY22 budget again by $611,000, retaining the proposed FY23 budget of $9.4 million, increasing the combined GO Zone budget for FY22 by FY23 by $611,000 and no change to the FY23 service capacity. Any questions on any of this before I move on to the recommendation slide? Okay. So again, finally, staff recommends the board approve Amendment 8 to Task Order 1 with River North Transit via effective September 7th, 2022 through September 30th, 2022, in an amount not to exceed $614,948.
Now, can you go back 1 slide so we can see what you're recommending?
Yes, sir.
There, recommending. Okay, so discussion.
I'm fine with option 2. I appreciate staff filling this 3-week hole. I was disappointed that we have to do this. I think that's that's a miss from a year ago when this contract was set up. Kind of an unforced error. But I'm fine with recommendation two. Thank you.
I'm gonna, support staff's recommendation on this, and I feel like I owe some folks an explanation for why, given that I voted no, to expanding, the overall, contract amount a couple months ago. That, you know, these are the service levels that the board approved. And I don't think that there's anything to be gained by having 1 month of significantly reduced service followed by an entire fiscal year of expanded service. So I'm going to support staff's recommendation on this.
There's no further discussions or
So slide 39 says 611.
I think I've got it. typed
Which
over
one
there.
is right? The 611 or 614?
I think it's 614, but tell me. Yeah.
I believe it's 611.
Your recommendation slide says,
Yes, it's 614.
would you prefer us to do a 611 or are you going to come back for $3,000?
614. So, okay, thank you. The amendment on the contract says 614. So the correct number is the ultimate figure. Thank you, Paul, for the save, please.
Move to approve the recommendation as presented with $614,948.
Second.
Motion and a second. For discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed. Motion carries. With that, it is 11:46 and we'll take a 30-minute break for lunch, then reconvene here at about 12:50. Thank you. 223. 1223. It's a very small one. It's a small one. Can't see that well anymore. It's 12:23 PM. We will reconvene our board directors meeting. Item 4 is discuss and consider approval of inflation adjustment compensation for DCTA and NTNC staff. We previously had direction on this. So we need a motion to table, or can we just pull this? Joe, can we just table this?
Not today. No,
At another meeting. This, or is it gonna be addressed in the budget?
it'll need to come back in another meeting.
So can we table it?
Unless
Before,
it's gonna get addressed in the budget discussion, then we don't even need this item anymore. We table it, we're gonna bring back and discuss it under this.
My understanding was we were going to table this and bring this back at the September meeting to discuss. Okay,
Because it's FY 2022 funded item.
gotcha. Okay, so we'll go ahead and table. Do you have a question?
oh, well, I want to point out, you know, I kind of threw some off the cuff numbers out based on like an assumed current base pay of about $30,000 a year. And I'm now seeing that operators and service attendants both start at $14 an hour, and dispatchers start at $15.50 an hour. So, you know, if somebody's making I'm just for the sake of round numbers, $15 an hour, 32 hours a week, because we know some folks aren't getting 40 hours a week, 48 weeks a year, which is pretty generous considering how many folks end up having to take the summer off, whether they want to or not. There probably are several folks in our organization who are making $23,000 a year or less. And for those folks, and that's before taxes, right? That's not take home. And for those folks, a 5% increase, would get them an additional $1,152 a year. And then if we add on top of that $1,000 one time, then we're saying between FY 22 and FY 23, we're giving them an additional $2,152. And that's for cost of living adjustment and one-time bonus combined for those folks who are at the bottom, the very bottom of the pay scale. Is anybody willing to consider increasing the one-time amount in light of how much shifting the focus to the cost of living adjustment is going to impact folks at the bottom of the pay grade? Of course, understanding that COLA is not for operators.
What my thinking is on this is that we table this, it's given the right to come back. You'll have your opportunity at the next meeting to, then we can just discuss it.
Okay.
Well,
I just want to make sure staff has all of our input because we want to be able to just the budget next month, right?
One thing that there's cost of living adjustments and there's adjustments to the pay scale. And so what I would like for us to ask the staff to do is look at those different pay scales. And we might need to do reclassifications for those lower positions. So we have multiple options here. One would be a reclassification of those positions and adjust them separately and distinct. One would be a market sliding all the scales for everybody. And one could be the inflation adjustment, that's the one-time payment. Those are all three separate things, could all be evaluated separate and distinctively. And you could look at some of those that are lower and we say, you know what, that is not where we value those positions. We value those positions more. If we need to look at those, I don't know how that will conflict with the contracts and so forth, but I'm totally open to us looking at those individuals. We do that routinely at the county. We look at different classifications, different positions and say, you know what, we need to target and focus on those while we're working on everybody else as well. So give them extra care and attention. So
I think that's
I'm open
fair.
for us looking at, we were sitting there talking about the numbers, you know, living wages and so forth. So very open.
I think that's very fair. I want to make sure that we're we all recognize that unless NTMC changes a lot in terms of what their base pay is, particularly for folks at the bottom of the pay scale, operators, service attendants, dispatchers. Unless they raise that basement, $1,000 one time is not going to be enough for those folks just to keep pace with inflation. I hope that NTMC will look at that, but I'm concerned given that that's not within our direct control. So that's my piece. I've said it.
Any other discussion on this item? If not.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to read back in terms of direction for the next meeting. We're gonna budget in FY 23 for this 5% adjustment all across the board, all personnel on NTMC side, union or exempt, or salaried or exempt, all personnel on the DCTA side, and then budget for this $1,000 one-time payment. This conversation that is being had now about how do we raise the level for everyone, that is something that I will take as an NTMC board member and ask the NTMC board president to bring proposal for how those things can happen. And certainly we'll work alongside him and his general manager and their team and the chair to bring forth alternatives.
Yeah. Okay. So. So we do we need to just? This is a discussion. No, this is discuss and consider. So then. Direction for the board is to table the item, bring it back next month. Further directions we talked about.
I move that we lay the item on the table.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Move on now to item number 5. That is consider approval of task order with Kittleson and Associates in the amount of $750,000 for member city transit oriented development as described in previously awarded Federal Transit Administration grant agreement. Presenter Paul Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm joined by Mr. Tim Palermo, our manager of planning and data analytics. And we're here to talk to you today about this member city transit oriented development planning analysis. If you could, oh, wait, sorry. So in this item, we're recommending that the board of directors authorize the interim CEO to execute a task order in the amount of $750,000 to complete this study. This is funded $150,000 in local dollars plus $600,000 of a federal grant. And that authorization would be contingent upon this item being approved along with the FY 2023 operating budget. So to revisit this project that we talked about during the strategic board workshop back in June, DCTA received a grant in 2019 for transit-oriented development planning. And the objectives being enhancing economic development to increase ridership, aligning DCTA's planning processes with the planning processes of our sister agencies along with the private sector, facilitate multimodal connectivity and accessibility, create and increase access to transit hubs, and then really create a methodology by which this agency does transit-oriented development moving forward. The way that the grant is set up with FTA is that our $150,000 matching contribution would be applied towards the Old Town Louisville ITC project, which is really the redevelopment of that area with the property that DCTA has purchased to build an DCTA administrative facility plus other anticipated to be revenue generating properties. It's really important that we integrate this project approach with all of our member cities, and we've started having those conversations already to ensure that we do that. For instance, we've already been in conversation with the city of Louisville and their recently completed or nearly complete Old Town master plan to allow us to develop materials that would go to a developer, request for proposal, or it'll also be able to align with the city of Highland Village and their plans at this FM 407 in Selmeyer, and then obviously provides an opportunity for a transit-oriented development hub on the west side of Denton, adjacent to the UNT campus. At the bottom here, just trying to lay out more explicitly how what we're doing ties into what the city of Louisville is doing. And as we sat down with City Manager Powell and her staff, we stacked hands on the idea that they've done work already that could be leveraged for this project, and this project actually carries their project forward. And so that will be a collaborative effort throughout, along with collaborating with the planning staff at our member cities who are going to be affected by the outcome of this plan. So in general, the scope of work for this project, you see the overall schedule is about 18 months. We expect to have a heavy dose of stakeholder outreach with advisory group on the public and private sector, planning staffs at all of our municipality partners. There's a data collection phase. Old Town Station Plan is its own dedicated task, and then we'll run that on the front end for about a year so that we can initiate then the Burns property project and ultimately get that thing to construction sometime in the 2025 timeframe, potentially. And then create these station area concepts again that allow us to have a framework then to do the same sort of thing across the A train corridor as well. So the good thing about this study is that regardless of whether or not there's ever another railroad corridor to be had, these things produce transit-oriented development plans that could facilitate movement through other modes. So any questions on that?
Question. Yeah, so am I correctly interpreting the graphic that it's not the whole corridor necessarily that's being studied, it's this particular location, I mean, well, the Old Town Station, 407 and Selmeyer, and then Denton north of I-35W, and only those 3 locations are included in the scope?
No, the scope includes the connecting corridor.
Okay.
But we're focusing our efforts on the
Okay.
TODs that the cities would benefit from directly, regardless of what happens with the future of that corridor.
Okay, I was just, because I know we had kind of talked about the 377 where the KCS line crosses 377 as an area of rapid residential and commercial development.
Right.
But okay, I'm good, thanks.
Other thoughts? Or this is an action item, so we need a motion. I'll move for motion to approve. Got a motion in a second. All in favor? All by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to thank everybody for working on this. I mean, it's one of the most important things of a transit agency is to be able to optimally use its areas for transit-oriented development. I'm thinking last time I was mayor, we did a TOD overlay, and that is one of the major reasons that I think that our city supported it at the time and continues to support it, because we do have opportunities. And we just want to make sure that that we garnish every opportunity. And this was a grant that we met with the FTA, and we weren't even thinking about it. And she actually suggested that we apply for it. She really wanted it to give it to us because she was pleased with what DCTA was doing.
Diane, I want to compliment you. This was many years ago that you were working on this. We talked about it years ago, and thank you for having those relationships and partnerships with the different agencies to make this happen. And I'm glad that we're studying this. This is projects outside of our lifespan, right? But that's part of what we're called to do, is work on future projects, future possibilities, and have stuff, infrastructure ready in the event we can avail ourselves. That helps the city's plan. But I want to make it clear, we're not taking the eye off the ball on our existing corridor, right? I mean, we still
Correct.
want to develop all the available opportunities, like you said, along the corridor that we already have. This is just future long-range planning.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Moving on to item 6, discuss A-train updates, long-range maintenance planning, low-ramp operation modifier, system joint rail operations facility, and A-train enhancement study. Presenters Paul Christina and Roni Phillip.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Phillip couldn't join us today, but I'm happy to take you through this conversation. This is an update item only. However, the following item is going to be for an approval on the purchase of the LORAM friction modifier system. And so just keep that in the back of your mind as we get to that part. So just by way of update first on the Joint Rail Operations Facility, obviously the ILA was signed last fall. You all approved a financial terms with DART to do a short-term lease, and then you also approved us to begin spending DART's money on planning and design of the Joint Rail Facility. Right now, the Joint Rail Facility is in excess of 30% design. We expect a 60% design to be delivered sometime around the Labor Day holiday. Then the project should be completed through design by the end of this year and expect to go to bid in January, February timeframe of next year. In terms of the short-term lease, we're very close, thanks to Mr. Corfita and Caitlin Holland on the DART side and staff on both sides are very close to finalizing the terms of the short-term lease. There's some things to nail down with regard to insurance liabilities around the public agencies and this new shiny rental equipment that's going to be in our yard. But those things have a path forward. One of the things that I mentioned back in January when when you all approved authority for us to execute the lease was our interest in having an operating plan that we could rely upon. And so those pictures on the right-hand side of the slide illustrate that operating plan is fairly well in hand. What you can expect during the commissioning stage, that is the stage before the Silver Line comes online for revenue service, is that ultimately all 8 of the Silver Line equipment sets are going to be staged in the DCTA yard on the outer 2 most tracks, leaving the remainder of the tracks for Rio Grande Pacific to be able to do A-train operations, and they anticipate that won't have any impact on their efforts. When the project is in revenue service, when Silver Line's in revenue service, expect only 2 to 3 equipment sets from the Silver Line to be in our yard at any given time, with the rest of those being out at a new facility at Shiloh Road in Plano. The revenue service stage shows a 4th track going through the building there. That's because that's the preferred alternative that's being developed, is the dedicated construction of a dedicated pit for that new FLIRT equipment. We expect delivery, or DART expects delivery of the first equipment set from Silver Line sometime around December. And so our interest is to get the short-term lease in hand as soon as possible so that the vehicle can be received without missing a step. And then obviously, once we get this in the bag, we're going to transition our focus to the long-term lease that would allow DCTA to get down to Carrollton and DART to operate out of the Joint Rail Facility. And the work has already started on that with the delivery of the latest appraisal of the A-train corridor, plus the corridor from Trinity Mills to Carrollton. So the pieces are coming together for that to take off as soon as we get this one nailed down. Next, I want to talk to you about an update on the steps we've made since you approved task order to do the A-train enhancement study. I'm going to talk about track and signal requirements, the Carrollton station, and then crossings on that correct Carrollton segment. A couple of different ways that we're going to have to pursue to get 20-minute off-peak headways on the A-train. And these 2 highlighted here, PTC improvements and curvature super elevation modifications. Our consultants partners at LAN have done a really great job of identifying what is required in order to make the train go faster to meet that 20-minute off-peak headway mark. This is just a demonstration of a graph that was just one deliverable or one piece of a deliverable, but the red line is the track civil speed as it exists today. Like, this is what the infrastructure can allow. And the green line is what the train is actually doing. And so the purpose of this PTC improvement and this curvature super elevation study is to cause the green line to completely go up to the red line so that we're running at maximum speed, and then see how we can make the red line go up even higher. And so again, just give you a little insight into the analytics and things that go on behind the scenes here, but the team's doing a really great job. So this is about new sidings and siding extensions, and this is called a streamline chart. And this is a depiction of the railroad from Denton down to downtown Carrollton. And one of these lines represents one A train that leaves Denton at the beginning of a run and then makes its way through Med Park, the future Corinth site, Highland Village, Lake Louisville, from north to south. Lines that come from here are trains that are moving again from downtown Carrollton south to north. Everywhere that those 2 lines intersect, that's a place where 2 trains are going to meet. And so you have to have a siding or some other means for the trains to pass.
So this you have time on it.
Right.
Time is going on the bottom and distance is on top.
Correct. Yeah. So what happens is on one line, on one trip, that one trip takes about 20 minutes. This is every trip all throughout the day. And where the lines cross, there has to be a siding for the trains to meet and pass. So what the study is telling us is that to meet this 20-minute off-peak headway time, we likely have a siding extension here at Med Park and a new siding down here at Broadway, which it feels like a pretty good solution. We also have an alternative to this, excuse me. We've run an alternative that includes 15-minute headways. And when you do 15-minute headways, obviously these lines get much closer together, much more meets and passes, more sidings required.
So what does this represent? A 30-minute headway? Is that what? 20, gotcha, thanks.
Can you tell us, sorry, can you, can you tell us more about, the relationship between, the plan to, add additional siding, and, I know much more nebulous and far off in the future plan to potentially do double tracking at some point. Is this something that can serve that goal, or is this more of a short-term measure until we can get to that longer-term goal?
So the idea is that you first build sidings
Sorry.
until it's, no, it's fine. It's fine. You first build sidings until it's no longer conducive, and then you build double track. Make sense?
And can the infrastructure, how do I put this? Can the infrastructure that's put in place with the sidings be converted into double tracking? Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I was asking. There we go. Great.
It's not a throwaway, not a throwaway project.
Correct. What happens is you remove the turnout or the switch and then just extend the track.
So, Paul, this, you may have said this, and I didn't hear it. This is for current capacity, is this for us to help, is this to accommodate or is this planned to accommodate the Corinth edition?
It does not include the Corinth edition. Corinth shows up here. What you see is the siding is in the vicinity of Corinth. And so when it comes time to have the conversation about the Corinth station, then we determine if that siding needs to be any longer, or at that point you are in a section of double track because you're building the Corinth station somewhere down the track.
So do they look at that, like, if we build the Corinth station, we go ahead and put a double track there, so it's building that double track piece, and that's already there instead of adding it elsewhere? Does it make sense to have one construction project right there, one mobilization, one everything right there versus offsite?
It could potentially, I mean, what this is showing is that if we're building extending a siding in the vicinity of a new proposed Corinth station or potential Corinth station in the future, then maybe it makes sense to just make it a little bit longer so that we're ready for Corinth when the time comes. But in this study, the Corinth decision point has not been assumed or addressed. We've done Corinth analysis in previous studies that allowed us to see that this kind of lines up with what that was saying, because we recognize the Corinth conversation still has ways to go.
So it's fair to summarize and say we would need these regardless, yes or no, on a correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because this study is focused on how do we get down to Carrollton faster than we're running today. Okay.
But what I'm seeing here is that simply extending the Med Park siding should capture the impact of a Corinth station.
It appears that way, but I can't commit to that.
Okay.
It's a good question that we can get really precise on, but I don't know that we can commit to that, because the other part is when you add the Corinth station, now you have a stop where a stop doesn't exist today, and so all the lines
Throw off all the other things.
right
That's my point. Yeah, we're
tracking, so
Yeah.
okay.
We're here all week.
Next slide. Here's a look at the conceptual planning for the downtown Carrollton station. What you see here is the silver line, proposed silver line coming through, and this is a eastern, single-sided eastern platform for the A train. You have about 130 feet to walk. If you get off the train here, you got about 130 feet to get to the silver line platform. The green line platforms up above, these solid black rectangles are the green line platform footings. It appears, based on this really preliminary analysis, that the station fits, that we can avoid this significantly sized water main down here. The other important thing we've gotten out of this study is that we don't have to have a double track section between Trinity Mills and Carrollton to facilitate service on a 20-minute headway, and on the 15, I got to confirm. But that's a big takeaway that we didn't have before we got this study done. For information, we're going to meet, staff is going to meet with the city of Carrollton next week, I believe, to go through these same findings and just get their feedback on what they're thinking and how they're thinking about it. It sounds like a lot of people are interested in the outcome of what we do here.
Paul, Kristen and I were looking at this yesterday, and she being an engineer, I think she can speak to this a little more clearly. But what is the customer experience in this space? Let's flip that thing from a top down to and am I dodging, weaving, ducking? Is there a need to put LED blinking lights because it's so complicated? Do we have that at some point?
There's a lot going on in this little piece of real estate. I think that's where when we get to the architectural concept phase, we're going to have to be really paying attention. I mean, the biggest thing we were trying to do right now is figure out how far people are going to have to walk. You know, like this from here, like I said, it shows about this is about 200 feet to the transfer plaza, and then that transfer plaza is here, and you got another, and that would get you up the stairs to the green line.
Yeah, so this doesn't show any of that really, right?
Right. So the next step is, if we want to proceed here, we have to take the step of saying, okay, now architecturally, what does a cross section look like? What is the passenger going to see, and how do you make it easy for them? This is a complex spot for sure.
Mayor, Vice Chair Gilmore, before I left Carrollton, we were actually talking with Dart about that yellow block being a building that would house either an escalator, multiple elevators, because Carrollton's at that position was very concerned about moving a lot of pedestrians between multiple elevators. So don't know if that's still there, but I know that was discussed a couple of years ago.
And then finally, the other component to this is that there's a number of, I'll get ahead of myself. One of the other things we're looking at is what's the width of right of way across that whole corridor. And initially not knowing if we were going to need double track or not, could the entire right of way accommodate double track? The answer is generally yes, but the good news is we don't need it for the scenario that we're operating under. But generally we're looking at about 100 foot right of way in most places. And then when you get to where the green line is down at Carrollton in the station, you see we're about 65 feet, and there would be the track, and then the station would be off to this side of it. We were looking at if you look at double track on the far south end of the corridor, you see we're right up against the edge of the right of way line. We'd also be right up against the edge of that water main. And so another reason to try to stay away from double track at that end of, or a double sided platform at that end of the line. Okay, and then the last piece here is about the at-grade crossings on the corridor. Every one of these yellow markers plus these signalized symbols represents an at-grade crossing. Only 3 of the crossings are signalized today with lights and flashing lights and gates. The rest of them are just crossbucks and unsignalized. When we talk about the frequency of trains that's going to move up and down this corridor, that means these crossings will have to be protected. That means the horn has to sound unless the quiet zone is impacted. The easiest way to achieve a quiet zone is to close a crossing. And so one of the things that we're doing is looking at every one of these crossings and trying to understand what are the alternatives for drivers if a crossing were to be closed. For instance, if Jackson Road or Jackson Street here, we're gonna be closed, a driver that's trying to get to it from the north would have to go another 2/10 of a mile. A driver coming from the south would have to come another 4/10 of a mile. And this is really gonna be when we have this conversation with the city of Carrollton, they're gonna really be the ones to tell us what they're willing to accommodate here. If we don't close many crossings, we're talking about what are called 4-quadrant fully signalized gates, kind of like what you see on the A-train corridor. All those are fairly expensive. And so we'll have to wait and see what the city of Carrollton says and how this fits into their overall plans. Next thing I wanted to talk about, so getting out of the A-train enhancement study, wanted to talk about more on our efforts to inform our long-range financial plan.
Oh, just a quick question on the study. Does that include or encompass checking any federal opportunities for funding, any grants?
The study does not, but that's what we do for staff. What the study does is going to give us the projects so we can understand how it fits into the different the buckets and categories of funding. For instance, in the last infrastructure bill, grade crossing closure funding is now a dedicated competitive grant program. So if we can come together with the city and pool our funds and put together a compelling narrative to close a lot of these crossings, we should have a pretty good story to tell. So wanted to just give you an update on our long-range financial plan. We mentioned back in this budget process how the A-train has a number of significant maintenance costs that are coming up on the 5-year time horizon. And we've also been having conversations about our long-range financial plan that has this really healthy cash reserve number, and how it is in our interest to, as best we can, reflect what really the needs are in terms of long-range maintenance. And so what you see here, this is the first guess. This is just what was done through the budget process around mechanical things relative to the A-train. As a staff, we're now looking at not just what is the vehicle major maintenance, but what's track and maintenance away major maintenance, and what's our signal system major maintenance. And the long and the short of it is that today in our long-range financial plan from 23 to 30, we've got $19.6 million identified. And it's really just kind of this 2 million, 2.8, 2.1, 2.4, but informed by these sorts of numbers, which is really just a first pass. We're coming up with about $33 million worth of need. Now, every year, we're going to look at this again and understand, okay, let's get a little clearer view on what really has to be done this year, what could be pushed out. But in terms of order of magnitude, wanted to give you some idea about what the potential bogeys could be out in the long term. And then we also have to do the same thing for our bus operation and that sort of thing. Make sense?
I'm glad you captured this because I watch cities do this all the time, where you end up in a hole and you make short-term decisions that don't capture this.
Right.
And then people jump on you when you got a pile of cash, but they don't realize that there's a maintenance component to everything that you own, and then you get beat up for wanting to put a bond issuance out or something like that. It's either you pay go or you bond fund, and I don't even think we have the option to do that. So pay-go is an important. I'm a little disappointed to see that it seems like we've been underfunding this up to this point. So hopefully we can get that squared.
Well, and like I said, this is a first pass based on what the maintainers and our contractors are saying. We've got to get in the weeds with them and really scrounge through all this to say, okay, what's a necessity and what's maybe a little nicer to have this year, but could wait 2 years, say. And there's a lot of line items to go through on that. This also doesn't include any investment we would make to expand the A-train or anything like that. So, okay. And then this, I think this is the last item on this section. This is the story on the LORAM friction modifier. So the LORAM friction modifier is a box on the rail side, the side of the railroad that looks like this. And it contains a lubricant that gets spread on the rail, and when the train runs over the lubricant, it spreads the lubricant across the top of the rail. And the reason that's important is because of this thing called shunting. And shunting is what occurs when the low voltage current that runs between the two rails is the circuit is closed because the steel wheels of the train run across it. And the reason that's important is because every block of rail along the railroad allows our dispatchers to understand where the trains are. And so a red square is where a train is, a white square a train is not, green square a train is not. So when a train loses shunt, the train disappears off the dispatch screen and everything has to stop. And so we were experiencing this a whole lot with the implementation of PTC. And our staff procured these systems in order to prevent rust from forming on the top of the rail and also to enhance the connectivity. And it's worked really well. This graph shows the incidence of pre-LORAN failures to post-LORAN failures in the time period of about between February 21 and April of this year. Now, what you see is that we've got some areas that we still have failures occurring, and this contract that we're asking for approval on would allow us to procure 4 more of these LORAN systems to enable shunting to happen in those spots and eliminate the need for us to go out and scrub the rail, literally scrub the top of the rail with a machine that costs $90,000 that we would have to buy. And so approve $63,000 for LORAN machines, save $95,000 and not have to buy a scrubbing machine, and also save the labor of not having to scrub in the future. So that's the end of that presentation. What's that?
Good presentation. All right, learn something new every day.
So
What is shunting, right?
Yeah. Okay, so we can move on to item 7. That's a nice segue for you to continue.
So Mr. Chair, this item is authorizing the Board of Directors to execute a second amendment to the agreement with LORAN Technologies for 4 more railway friction modifier units in the amount of $63,051.80. The reason this is coming to you is because the previous purchase plus this puts me over the $75,000 threshold for the CEO.
Move to approve as presented.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So that you can take a break from your voice.
Thanks.
I guess Mr. Trilla. Call him back up. Yes, we're up to item number 8. Discuss FY 23 projects, Arctic Wolf Cybersecurity Service and Swiftly Connect Transit Platform.
Good afternoon, board. I'm moving to my technology hat right now. This is just an update. We've seen a few of these items already come up during the budget presentation. Just wanted to provide some additional information as to where these projects are going, what some of the benefits are moving forward. So we'll start off with Arctic Wolf Cybersecurity Services. So this is a infographic in the actual event themselves, but to keep it as non-techno babble as I can. Arctic Wolf is a managed detection and response architecture. What does that mean? It is a 24/7 network operations center for DCTA. DCTA currently has a small IT staff that at full staff is myself and 3 other individuals. And we do not have a in-house cybersecurity expert by any stretch of the imagination. For an agency our size, that would be quite expensive. What this service provides us is actual devices at each facility that provide 24/7 monitoring for DCTA. Along with that, it acts as a security operations center that augments IT staff, security experts that are available to DCTA at a call whenever we need them, and are also monitoring our services 24/7. It also integrates and ingests data from all our existing tools. So we have firewalls in place, we have endpoint protection in place, we have cloud services. It integrates into all those platforms and actually takes in data from all those and kind of consolidates it all into a central security dashboard with regular reporting. Some of the benefits and resources that the service provides us, won't go too far into these, but again, 24/7 monitoring, Office 365 monitoring, kind of a newer landscape. People kind of forget that they have data on the cloud, and we have a lot of data on the cloud these days. So this actually connects into our Office 365 environment, monitors for any odd behavior, odd logins, compromised accounts, compromised passwords, folks having their accounts accessed from other countries when they shouldn't be. Those kind of items get brought to our attention right away, usually remediated within a few minutes. Basically letting us know anything that's going on in our network. Manage intrusion detection systems, and another strong benefit is regular internal and external pen test, network penetration test to make sure that our network is up to par with where it should be. Resources provided to us by Arctic Wolf, 2 security experts assigned directly to our account, reporting for our services, as well as training and regular newsletters for our staff to keep our internal staff up to date on security procedures as well. In addition, Arctic Wolf also provides $1 million in financial assistance for our cybersecurity incident costs. So we have cybersecurity insurance through our TML provider, with $1 million as last I checked. And this augments that current cybersecurity program that we have for items such as ransomware, compromised email, compliance, and other cyber legal liability issues. We've actually been running Arctic Wolf as a pilot program for the past quarter or so. It's gone in and already identified certain vulnerabilities and remediation steps. They regularly work with our IT staff to create roadmaps for incident response. They've patched and remediated existing vulnerabilities. Sorry, it's not full. With guidance from Arctic Wolf staff. They've gone ahead and we already have those network sensors on our network, constantly monitoring and looking for malicious traffic. And they've identified areas for improvement in our security posture. As I've come up here several times over the past couple of years and said that we've had a cybersecurity assessment back in 2020. The goal for all these products and everything that we're doing is to line up and check off the boxes for our compliance to make sure cybersecurity is up to par throughout the agency, and just to kind of get us close to that NIST, that National Information Security framework that we're following here at DCTA along with other government entities. So before I get into pricing, I'll ask if there's any questions from the board on these topics.
Two questions.
Sir.
The first one, and I know there's some different benchmarking out there, like Microsoft Secure Score. Do you know where we are in that world?
Off the top of my head, we're kind of in that. I think out of the 3 to 5, we're kind of in that mid-range right now. With a lot of other agencies, we're kind of in that 3.1, 3.2 score range.
Okay.
As far as the NIST framework is concerned, that's what I've been looking at.
Gotcha. And with a name like Arctic Wolf, this is really more a statement. I would expect them to deliver the 3 wolf with the moon t-shirts to everybody. I'm just saying.
I'll reach out to them for that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
All right. The reason this is in front of the board today is because next month we'll be coming forward with an actual contract to present with the vendor. And due to the value of the contract, the pricing schedule for a 3-year contract is as follows on the screen. Total contract value of $156,434.32 based on Texas Department of Information Resource pricing.
Javier, how many appliances are we talking about under that contract?
4 appliances, 1 for each facility.
Okay, and then is that working its way down onto the desktops and the workstations as well?
The desktops and workstations all have an agent pushed out to them as well.
Gotcha. And how many of those off the top?
75-ish.
Gotcha. Now let's scale and scope. Just
Along with mobile devices and everything else that we have on the network.
IT hat looks good.
Appreciate that. Moving forward to the Swiftly Connected Transit platform. This project represents a financial and technical investment into our bus network in the form of enhancements that benefit both passengers and our operators alike. This is a platform that we've really been excited about, looking forward to it, implementing on the bus service. Also known as computer-aided dispatch automated vehicle location in old bus terms. This platform adds additional capabilities to our bus fleet. Currently, we have several modules with the Swiftly platform already. We have real-time passenger predictions available to passengers now. That kind of information is fed through the transit app or through Google Maps. Moving forward, some additional passenger amenities from this are rider alerts that are automated through the system, as well as alerting riders and passengers of service adjustments that are made to our service when there's a deviation, closure of a bus route, anything else that could impact the bus service that's added to the system would come up through a rider alert. We have some current capabilities with staff now. They have live operations and GPS playback, so they can kind of see what happened during a bus route. This would actually allow dispatch staff to push out changes, service adjustments to the rider or to the operators through providing tablets that all have installed on their vehicles. It would also provide additional reporting capabilities to staff based on the findings from the GPS tablets. The GPS tablets also work with operators to provide on-time performance, whether they're behind, whether they're ahead, stop, go, and they also provide mapping for drivers. So it's actually a good onboarding tool for new operators. If they're not familiar with the area, they have the option to switch their tablet from the stop, go, on-time performance section to mapping capabilities and actually give them routes that they need to follow. And that same routing ability, I mean, we all know that there's a lot of construction going on in Denton and deviations on occasion. Those live deviations will actually pop up on the driver's tablet, alerting them and letting them know they need to take a different route to get to where they need to go. Connecting with vehicles, along with the onboard app that's on the tablet that I've already discussed. One of the bigger topics of conversation that we've mentioned several times is data collection at DCTA. With this platform also comes cloud-based automated passenger counters, letting the vehicles automatically collect data as far as who's getting on and off the bus, when they're getting off the bus, where they're getting off the bus or getting on the bus in that sense. It adds those counters to both the front and rear doors where applicable, and just provides cleaner data overall to the data analytics team here at DCTA and make better data-driven decisions. In addition, some other items that will be installed in the vehicles are next stop annunciators and next stop bus signage that are in the vehicles. That is a service that actually helps us with ADA compliance for those who are on our buses. And finally, additional integration with our transit partners. For example, we have the transit app for Next Bus and other transit planning tools that are on an app. Google Maps as well integrates with these. The automated passenger counters actually integrate with those by providing real-time bus crowding information, probably handy for the UNC bus routes. And then the automated vehicle announcement system also ties into GPS to make sure that the announcements are in the correct location at the correct time. So I just said a lot about what the capabilities are. I'm going to pause here for any questions. Okay. Proposed project timeline. I will come back in September with a with a contract between Swiftly and a third-party vendor. This will actually be procured via TIPS, the interlocal purchasing system, just a contract agreement such as Texas DIR, very similar in that regard. So that contract execution would be in October, pending approval of the FY23 budget and contract in September. And then around October, November timeframe, we'd be looking at a project kickoff. And then the installation timeline is it's TBD right now, but the information I was given by the vendor is anywhere from 6 to 9 months for installation, configuration, of course, training for staff. It's a big jump from where we are today. So project costs, as Amanda mentioned earlier during the budget conversation, we reviewed our current bus fleet and where we're going as of January. So we kind of revised those numbers to make sure that we have the correct number of revenue vehicles. One-time hardware installation and implementation based on 50 revenue vehicles is $692,953. A little bit higher than the actual quote that you'll see from Swiftly, because there is some additional funding built into there to bring vehicles up to state of good repair if needed when they actually go in and do the installation, and other gotchas that we may find during the implementation of the hardware. Year one fees include software modules. So this is all cloud-based software. It's just software modules built into it. So there's yearly fees associated, as well as additional LTE connectivity, which is cellular connectivity on the vehicles to make sure they're all connected, including with redundancy. So that's $202,000 a year for a year one cost of $895,000. Ongoing operating fees continue with the software module licensing, LTE connectivity, and any maintenance that we have along the way for the hardware. $233,493 per year, with a 5% increase in licensing fee each year. So again, this is just a discussion item. Next month, we'll come back with a contract based on budget approval.
Javier,
Sir.
is the that $233,000, is that baked into your 2023 budget?
This is an ELP. So in the ELP, there is a ongoing annual operating expenses, and that is built into that.
So yes, if we
Yes.
approve it with deal, yes.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Any questions?
A couple of quick ones. Does this reflect the changes in bus service?
It does. It reflects 50 revenue vehicles.
Can you recap? We talked about it last time that they don't have an option that allows us to do the rail and.
That is correct. Swiftly's focus is currently is bus and bus operations.
Is there someone who's doing it all? I don't remember that conversation. I'm sorry.
Doing it all that, I mean, you can look at something like Trapeze would probably do it all, but the cost is astronomical in comparison. I do have some contacts and some individuals that I've spoken to regarding adding APCs onto the rail fleet. There are options with that as well. The data that comes off the APCs is pretty much software agnostic. It really doesn't matter. The data dumps that come out of the APCs are CSV files. They're for us to do with as we please. So if we have a different type of APC installed on buses and a different type of APC installed on the rail vehicles, we're just going to dump it up into a different way of processing data anyway. So it's kind of a software agnostic.
And I don't know if this is an ask or if this is just a SOP. These are going on UNT buses because it's going on the whole system. Have we asked UNT to chip in on this? Do they get that? Well, they obviously get a benefit from it because it's a more accurate count for federal dollars. And since every dollar federal that is generated by UNT goes back into their contract, is my understanding.
I have not, however, some of this may, and I may need someone to keep me honest on this. There's funding available for these type of projects. So I'm not going to hold myself to this, but there is some grant funding opportunities that are available for these types of projects that we'll likely apply for.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, I'll make sure I'm clear. This is in the ELP to be executed at the first part of this year.
Correct.
And you're talking about applying for potential reimbursement.
If it's an applicable project, yes.
Okay. Got it.
Correct. There's no guarantee this will be grant funded. Right. We will look for those opportunities.
Other questions?
I would just like to add, thank you for doing this. I know that technology is a key part of what we do, and it's always changing. It's always under threat. And I would just offer that if you need any help or assistance from any of our IT people up at the county, the big department, whole team that does nothing but cybersecurity. And if we could help the agency in any way through reviewing plans or just any type of assistance, technical assistance, we would fully offer that to the agency on behalf of the county. We would love to be able to help you in any way.
Appreciate that very much.
It's a constant threat, you have to always be nimble, and something always changing. And so we'll be happy to help you in any way that y'all need.
Seeing no other questions or comments?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That takes us to item number 9, discuss local and regional transportation updates, legislative issues. I know we had the Urban Transportation Summit, forget. I think it was called the Economic Development and Transportation Summit. They rebranded it slightly last week. RTC meeting was there as well. I was present. I had an opportunity to visit with Vice Chair Rodriguez from Trinity Metro, and he introduced me to their new CEO, Rich Andreski. So I encouraged him to reach out to you, Paul, and welcome to the region, etc.
Thank you.
Our secretary was obviously our member there. You have any other notes from, I'm going to take some auspicious notes from that meeting.
No, not not really. So what was significant for DCTA was, we did also, besides our RTC meeting, we had our bylaws revision committee. And Judge Eads and I sit on that committee. I think it was a great discussion, and I think it's going to take a couple of more meetings to finalize, but I think it's going to come up with some really good bylaws. We talked about the changing mobility, data insights, and delivering innovative projects. We talked about the COVID recovery and how it's occurring across modes. Transit is still down 369% overall as of May, including DART, Trinity Metro, DCTA. We've already exceeded pre-pandemic ridership, due in large to the success of our GO Zone. So we talked about our regional van pool, and we talked about updated rules for the public comments at the Regional Transportation Council meetings. So there's going to be a drafted language on that already. We talked about improved bicycle and pedestrian routes and to rail and transit technology upgrades. And 43.75 million projects in South Dallas, 25 million in the RAISE grant. We also discussed the Unified Transportation Program and the regional 10-year plan update. We did talk about our regional parking garage policy and funding. And I think it went a lot smoother than it did the month before. And ratification of emergency action for North Texas, the Moves Bill grant. So that was from our RTC and our DRMC. The report that I offered went over our service decisions that what we had been working on. We talked about how the board is focused on data-driven decisions. We talked on our fair decisions, and that we're continuing in our CEO search. Yes, and Tito introduced me as well, and we're just all excited that some new CEOs coming with different ideas, and very excited to meet with you as well. And our speaker at the DRMC was Harvey Kronberg. He's a publisher of 2 online news service, Quorum Report and the Texas Energy Report. He discussed redistricting and his observation of how he thinks the elections are going to go in November. So that was really, really interesting. So that's pretty much all I have on that, Mr. Chair.
Paul, do you have anything to share on local research?
I see that everybody has at their place the op-ed that Mr. Morris wrote. If you'd like, I can certainly address them.
Sure, you can.
Or you want to take it?
No, it's like yeah. So we were very disappointed. I would say there's a group that are very disappointed of the halting on the high-speed rail. And so Mr. Morris is offering what he calls the 2.0. And you each have at your area his opinions of ordinary Texans' need to make high-speed trains reality. And so this is something that he is passionate about, and he is asking any boards or agencies if they would consider providing a letter of support for this study of a 2.0 high-speed train. So I said that I would bring it to our board to consider, and that may be a future agenda item. I'm not sure. But anyway, and then if there's anything you have to add.
It would probably be something that you bring it to back, talk and bring that back to the board to discuss.
Certainly could draft something for the board's consideration and get feedback and figure out what we want to do with it.
Yeah, it could take a form of a letter, it could take a form of a resolution supporting it.
either way.
Okay.
Uh,
Mr. Chair, I did have
other,
two other quick things. The Transit Coalition in North Texas luncheon that we have coming up soon. It is, no, this is the one on February the 16th at the Hyatt Regency DFW Airport. September, sorry. We are,
Good Lord, no.
yeah. We're a presenting sponsor, which means we get 8 tickets to a table, and obviously any board member who wants to attend is more than welcome. So far, we've got Vice Chair Gilmore and Secretary Costa, and then just wanted to make sure if any other board members would like to attend. It's September 16th at noon at the DFW Hyatt Airport. Okay. Okay. So with these two, we will probably fill the rest of the seats with staff. We can find definitely folks and others that want to come to the event, but wanted to open up to you all first. And then the other note is that we are working with NCT COG and helping them to facilitate their Denton County transit study. This is a study run by NCT COG looking at how transit could be implemented and deployed across Denton County, not specific to DCTA, but obviously we want to be tied in really tight with them through this. So we're going to help them facilitate their first in-person public meeting. It's going to be at the DDTC on Thursday, September 8th at 6:30 p.m. And so obviously, if any board members interested, feel free to join us there as well.
what's that date again?
September 8th, Thursday, September 8th at 6:30 p.m. And we appreciate the COG and their willingness to open up the door for us to be at the table with them while they're doing the study. Obviously, our efforts should be hand in hand with theirs.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's it, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Also at your plate, you have informational reports for your review and perusal. That takes us to get back to my agenda. Future agenda items, board member request. Let's see, next regular board meeting, September 22nd. I'll remind people we do have a special board meeting on the 6th of September and the 12th for interviewing CEOs. Any other future agenda items? I'll open it up to the floor. Anybody have anything? For board member request?
I'd be fine with putting the letter of approval up for conversation.
Okay.
On that RTC request.
Okay. Seeing none, the next, do we have any reports on items of community interest from any of our member cities, county? Seeing none, we're gonna get down early today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
So we will adjourn by acclamation. It is 1:27 p.m. Stand adjourned. Thank you all.